Good morning. Thanks for being here. I'm Stephen Romo in for Joe and Savannah today. And the post-Christmas travel rush is on, with a record number of travelers starting those flights or drives home after the holidays. Some parts of the U.S. enjoyed a white Christmas with snow hitting the Midwest and Pacific Northwest, while nearly 8 million people in the Southeast are bracing for an active storm pattern that's expected to hit later today. NBC News correspondent Marissa Parra is at Atlanta's Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport with the latest. Marissa, good morning.
Stephen, good morning from the world's busiest airport. I can tell you right now, it's definitely busy, but it is nowhere near the busiest that we have seen it before in the past, but definitely picking up steam. So in terms of what we are expecting with air travel overall today, we know that there is severe weather that could make some severe impacts when it comes to air travel. We know there's atmospheric rivers in the Northwest. That is happening right now. We're seeing heavy rain, wind, snow. But in the South, that is where we could definitely see in places like Houston, Dallas, we could possibly see some delays, some cancellations, depending on just how severe that weather gets. I know we're going to hear the weather in just a moment, but we know millions are at risk today for that severe weather. All of this, of course, coming just days after we saw that American Airlines outage, that snafu that grounded flights temporarily. And when it comes to driving, we are expecting a record number of travelers this holiday season. The majority of them are driving, taking to the roads. We know that the past 2 days on Christmas Eve and yesterday, Christmas Day and Hanukkah, those are the 2 days where traffic was at a minimum. But here's the bad news after that good news. We do expect that to pick back up. So if you would like to try to avoid congestion at its peak, at its worst, of course, we suggest trying to drive early in the morning. You've still got some time before 11 a.m. And, of course, once again, once the sun starts to set. But either way, regardless of how you are traveling, take it easy, take it slow, pack your patience, as they always say, and try to stay safe as you do it. Stephen, back to you.
All right, Marissa, thanks so much. And for more on the potential stormy conditions that could affect your travel plans, let's take a look at our morning news now weather. Meteorologist Denise Isaac joins us with more. Good morning, Denise.
Good morning, Stephen. Right now, though, in the south, nothing is really happening. We have some morning fog and some light rain moving towards Beaumont, Texas. But this afternoon, the story will be fairly different as we are tracking that severe weather threat from Houston all the way north in through Shreveport. So if you do live in the area shaded by the yellow coloring, we could be dealing with some very strong winds up to 60 miles per hour, the possibility for hail, and 1 or 2 tornadoes are also possible this afternoon and evening. So once again, have your plan in case something does happen or if a tornado is spotted. There's also a risk for flash flooding anywhere from Houston all the way into Little Rock and Greenville, Mississippi, all thanks to this area of low pressure that will pick up steam as we get into that daytime heating hours. And eventually that storm will then spread towards the upper Midwest tomorrow, bringing rain towards Chicago all the way into Minneapolis and areas of Wisconsin. And that system will then split. We will also have some rain moving towards the Ohio River Valley and Mid-Atlantic. Towards the west, the story continues to be the same, a very active weather pattern. Another system is moving in this afternoon and evening, bringing some more rain and also heavy snow, not only for the Cascades, but then expanding all the way into the Rockies. And that's system number 3 this week. By tomorrow, there's the 4th storm system that will bring even more rain and spread inland, with showers continuing from California all the way into Washington. As we take a look at the rainfall amounts, additional rainfall amounts anywhere between 1 to 3 inches possible from Seattle down into San Francisco. And rain also will continue to spread inland, and snow up to 3 feet possible in the Cascades as well as the Rockies, with some areas even receiving a little bit more. So if you're traveling today, as Marissa mentioned earlier, we will be dealing with some delays around the Southwest, and also not the Southwest, but the South towards Houston, Dallas, the Northwest as well. While New England, it's cold, sunny, fairly quiet. The same for places like Florida. So if you're traveling today, later on this afternoon, and you're traveling into Houston or Dallas or traveling out of those 2 airports, that's where we could be dealing with delays. The same for Seattle and Portland. And how about if you're taking it to the roads, if you're driving, make sure both hands are on the steering wheel, because we will be having some wet and slick conditions from Seattle down to Sacramento, as well as Dallas and Houston. Stephen, back to you.
All right, a lot going on. Denise, thanks so much. And let's head overseas now with the latest on the investigation into the deadly commercial plane crash that was caught on camera. That flight was heading for Russia, and witnesses captured the terrifying final moments on video showing the rapid descent in Kazakhstan. It was followed just seconds later by a fiery impact. Authorities say at least 38 people were killed, including both pilots, but as many as 29 people, including 3 children, survived. NBC News correspondent Kelly Kobayea has the latest.
A terrifying scene in the skies over the Caspian Sea. An Azerbaijan Airlines jet precariously flying across the sky, sharply losing altitude, then apparently trying to straighten out before crashing in a fiery explosion. A large section of the Embraer 190 fuselage still intact. A shocked survivor stumbling out, still on his feet, as others rush past into the wreckage to rescue more passengers. Incredibly, at least 29 people survived the initial crash, including 3 children. Families of some of the 67 on board searched for news of their loved ones at an airport in Russia. This man, who had a relative on the plane, saying, "We just got photos and videos of him. He is safe and healthy and walking." The flight took off from Baku, Azerbaijan, bound for the Chechen capital of Grozny in southern Russia. Russian state media said the aircraft was diverted due to fog. The site Flight Radar 24's tracking data showed the plane making a figure 8 near the airport in Kazakhstan, then sharply gaining and losing altitude in the final minutes before impact. Video from inside the plane as it was still in the air shows people calm, even after oxygen masks had been released. The Russian Aviation Authority quickly blaming an apparent bird strike for the loss of control and devastating crash. A flock of birds famously brought down U.S. Airways Flight 1549 back in 2009, the so-called Miracle on the Hudson. And earlier this month, an American Airlines flight out of New York had to turn back for an emergency landing after a bird strike. The exact number of dead still unclear as emergency workers recover bodies and investigators begin their search for clues.
Scary stuff. Our thanks to Kelly Kobayea for that report. And staying overseas now, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is condemning a holiday attack on his country by Russia, calling it inhumane. Russia launched a missile and drone attack on Ukraine's energy infrastructure Wednesday, striking a power plant and forcing civilians to seek shelter on Christmas morning. The country's war with Russia is entering its 3rd winter with no signs of that fighting letting up anytime soon. Aaron McLaughlin has more on the toll this is taking on Ukrainians.
As the war approaches its 3rd devastating year, the fight intensifies, with President Putin claiming his troops are gaining ground every day. The Ukrainians say those gains come at a high price for Russia.
I see how much troops Russians lose and how small piece of land they took.
Ukrainian soldier Alexei asked we withhold his last name for security reasons. He's been on the front lines in his country's battered east. It sounds like a living hell.
We as soldiers, we understand that it's war, but for civilians, it's very hard.
Ukraine is also losing ground in the Russian region of Kursk, captured by Ukrainian forces during a surprise offensive over the summer. According to a senior U.S. military official, the Kremlin has moved 12,000 North Korean troops into the region, helping the Russians reclaim 40% of their lost territory.
Clearly, Russia has massively accelerated its war effort against Ukraine, but we can see that they are going through record losses.
Andriy Zagorodnyuk is Ukraine's former defense minister. He believes the latest Russian onslaught is timed to the late January inauguration of President-elect Trump.
It's got to stop.
Who has said he can end the war in one day. Is that possible?
Ukrainian people don't want war. If there is an end to war, it needs to be genuine. It needs not to be an operational pause during which Russia can get more troops. Then the next offensive would be much more difficult than this one.
A possibility that weighs heavily on aid worker Katerina Terekova, who is dedicating her life to helping the estimated 10 million displaced Ukrainians.
What that war stolen from a lot of Ukrainians. This is a feeling, the roots with the connection with your hometowns, with the small villages where a lot of people was burned.
How long can the Ukrainian people endure this?
You know, if you asking lots of Ukrainians, all of us will be answering you. We will stand by the victory. This is our homeland. We need to be strong.
What happens next is seen as a test, not just of Ukrainian strength, but also of how the new Trump administration will respond. Aaron McLaughlin, NBC News.
Aaron, thanks. And to the Middle East now, leaders from Israel and Hamas are pointing fingers at each other to explain why a deal still hasn't been reached to start a ceasefire in Gaza and release the Israeli hostages. On Wednesday, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu blamed Hamas for backtracking on things already agreed on by both sides. Meanwhile, Hamas claims Israel has brought up new conditions, but they say negotiations are still making some serious progress. Now, this comes as mothers and sisters of Israeli hostages mark the first night of Hanukkah by holding a sit-in protest in Tel Aviv. More than 60 hostages are still believed to be held captive by Hamas in the almost 15 months now since the war started. Gaza's health ministry says more than 45,000 Palestinians have been killed during this conflict. NBC News international correspondent Raf Sanchez has more from Jerusalem.
Hey there, the Holy Land's marking a second Christmas and a second Hanukkah, with the war in Gaza still raging and Israeli hostages still in captivity in Gaza. There's been no let-up in Israeli airstrikes over the holiday period across the Strip. Early this morning, health authorities say 5 Palestinian journalists were killed when their van was hit by an Israeli missile outside of a hospital. They are from a network called Al-Quds TV. The network is saying that one of the journalists was actually waiting outside the hospital because his wife was giving birth to their child inside when this Israeli strike came down, completely destroying their press van. Israel is accusing these journalists of being Islamic Jihad operatives. They haven't yet offered details about that allegation. Ceasefire negotiations are continuing in Qatar. A senior Israeli delegation led by Israel's spy chief, the head of the Mossad, was there earlier in the week. It has now returned to Israel for discussions with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and the political leadership. What we are seeing is both Israel and Hamas publicly accusing each other of adding new last-minute demands, which they say are slowing down these ceasefire negotiations. Now, it's not unusual to see this kind of bickering in public. It doesn't mean that the negotiations have collapsed altogether. It does mean it is looking increasingly unlikely that we are going to have a deal in place by New Year's, which had been the hope. There is, though, a general sense of urgency right now generated by President-elect Trump, who said that, in his words, there would be, quote, hell to pay if a deal was not in place by the time of his inauguration on January 20th. I'll send it back to you.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.